Everyone that has
Hello.
joined us this evening. Absolutely. Yeah, Mish, I don't know if I told you, what I've done is this is the third person, you're the third person that I'm interviewing. And it's just to bring some, I think, some powerful conversations into the space. And I'm learning a lot through it. We've had our first two guests have been really, really interesting. And naturally, because it's also a very new process for me, I'm bringing in people that obviously I think have a very interesting thing to say, but that I have a very interesting background with. So I think let's start with that. Let's just, I'm going to ask you to very generically introduce yourself. And you know what I call this? Heinrich has taught me this term, the cocktail greeting. In other words, you feel like a bit of a pompous because you're like, well, my name is Nathan and what I do is, and then what we'll do is we'll unravel that a little bit. And so please introduce yourselves and thank you for yourselves. This could get interesting.
Well, there is multiple personality going on here, so it's all good. It's all good. You know me too well.
As I said that, I'm like, you're going to roll with that, no problem. Mish, just introduce yourself briefly.
Okay. Hi, Mad Hatters family. Hi, everybody out there. My name is Michelle Geldenhuys. I'm an author. My author's name is Michelle L. Geldenhuys. So my middle name actually, I don't really tell many people, is Lana. And I don't say this because Lana is Lana, which is actually anal backwards. So we'll just keep it here. We'll just keep it here. Let's not.
No one would have noticed that probably in your whole life if you didn't bring it up. But please carry that around.
Well, now it's the cat's out of the bag. So
I'll never ever unsee it. Carry on.
So yes, I'm an author. I'm passionate about, the spiritual journey, about healing, going into, dealing with traumas. And I've written a book called A Guide to Shadow Work, which really dives into, our unhealed stuff and how to work with that. And and I suppose that's kind of in a nutshell who I am.
Absolutely.
In a tiny nutshell.
I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, so there's a couple of reasons. The first one we mentioned, you and I were talking about it just now, because actually we haven't spoken much in the last few years. Part of it we'll go into when we dive into your story a little bit. You were also overseas for quite some time, but we were actually childhood friends. From, I don't know, what age? From about 10. I don't actually recall.
Look, I'd say it was probably from about 13. Maybe you were a bit younger, but I'd say from 13, 14, I'd say around about there. So we've known each other for my mathematics is terrible. 27 years, 26, 27 years.
And do you think we knew then that we were going to turn out quite as cooked as we did?
Yeah, it turned out to be these reprobates.
I think we already knew, right?
Yeah, we knew it was going to happen. It was going to happen. I think people need to know out there that we were, how different we were, as teenagers, when all those other teenagers were doing all those other crazy things, I don't know what, going out and what we were. I'll never forget lying on the living room floor, doing this with our fingers, holding our fingers and pulling them apart to see if we could see our aura.
Practicing our auras on a Saturday
questions
night.
The pendulum and.
I was very attached to my pendulum. I've actually considered revisiting that. For those of you who don't know, a pendulum is basically a way of tapping into the Earth's magnetic line to ask it questions. The form of it is dowsing, like for water. So the story goes quite far back. And I think that perhaps we were a little bit young to fully express it, although I think we spoke very deeply at that age, just how disturbed in some ways we both were. And I think I just want to bring an entry point of one of the reasons why I picked you. I've already given the obvious, but I really want to, I find that there is a lot of romanticism that is taking place in spirituality. And I feel that romanticism is really isolating and ostracizing a lot of people. And what I mean by that is people have this idea of what should be going on inside them. And nearly everybody, I think, that's even listening to this conversation is having the experience that's not really what's happening with them. You know, that image of the person sitting on the beach, everything's fantastic. So I think if there's any value we get in this is one of the main reasons I wanted to talk to you is because I know that you're not going to be scared to rattle a few cages or to make a few statements that are just your own perception and truth. As we go deeper into this little journey I'm going to, you know, pick your brain on. And I think that that's the most important thing for everyone. As we've said in the other things, please just be aware. These are simply our perceptions that we are sharing. We are not trying to sell any form of doctrine. And I think when you approach any form of truth is to just take the truth on board and see if any of it really works for you. So, yeah, how do you think about, what's your thoughts on what I just said now before we get going? I mean, essentially, it's the lack of romanticism, and you're one of those people I know who's diving right into the nitty-gritty of what some people call shadow work.
Yeah, you know, Nath, I think, you know, us in particular, I think why we veer away from, you know, that mainstream norm of, you know, spirituality being this, you know, bright, sparkly, you know, wonderful thing where you reach some sort of climax and then you're all enlightened and awakened and it all looks beautiful. I think that, especially for people like you and I have struggled quite intensely in our lives with, you know, mental illness and that. I know your story very well. You know, your epilepsy, your mental stuff that you dealt with, and my mental stuff that I dealt with as a teenager when depression really started to come to the forefront. You know, and my you know, past with drugs and that sort of thing, you know, as a teenager, having gone through that, and anxiety, and we've both suffered with psychosis in our lives. And I think a lot of people don't really understand the depths of fear that a psychosis can take you into. And you and I know that path, you know, we've been down, and that's really when you've really gone to the depths, you know, of your own darkness, and you've really experienced that, you know, you've been there, you've knocked on death's door, which I know we both have. You know, I can speak for myself too. When you've been there, you kind of enter, you know, the spiritual path. And when I say spiritual path, to me, I just mean self-actualization, spirituality, self-actualization, you know, the search for meaning, something more, something, you know, to create something beautiful out of, you know, turning cyanide into honey. I always refer back to that statement by Till Swan. And I think when you've been there and you enter the spiritual journey, you realize that I think you also get a kind of a weird sense of humor about life as well, because you've seen, you know, such darkness within yourself, you know, and been through such depths, you know. So yeah, it becomes a very real thing, as opposed to, oh, you know, look at me. But we all do it. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I haven't. We all do it. We have this persona that we portray, you know. But the reality of it is that the spiritual journey is it's mucky, it's dirty, it's chaotic, it's not pretty, it's not smooth sailing, it's not, you know, all those things. It's kind of all over the show, you know. So yeah.
I love that. I absolutely love that. I think that's such a good entry point before we just take a little bit of a dive into the little, you know, the different forces that have created you. I must say I got a little bit of goosebumps when you spoke about just how bad it can get. I think the thing that made me feel so alone, and perhaps why we were so bonded at that age, but I think perhaps stayed with me for a long time, is just peering and picking at people about what they were experiencing, and realizing that no one was quite as desperate on a soul level, you know, like almost like a night could be feel like a lifetime, like being so involved in some form of psychic pain that you can't even comprehend life the next day, or what you would be doing in a week, like just trying to survive hour and hour. But I also, yeah. And I also love the fact that you brought up humor, because, you know, we were talking the other day about the Greeks. If you look at the great writings, comedy and tragedy, they were so intertwined, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and your dark sense of humor and the way that people perceive things, I think, yeah. And I don't know about you, because this is such a vague question. But the moments I do feel like I touch some primordial or essence or God or whatever people want to call it, because there's so many definitions, I find an extreme humor in the thing that I tap into. So it's an interesting thing.
It's I find that we find humor. I've noticed that we find humor in people taking things too seriously, you know, and that's where this humor, because you know it's you kind of, I think you kind of get to a place in life where you realize, yes, life is painful and there's been painful stuff, but it's also just this kind of a big, almost like a big joke that you either get or you don't get. And I think we learned that there was a Quest seminar. I don't know if there's any other people on the Mad Hatters group who will remember this. And it was a seminar that was actually huge in the 90s. And Nath, both you and I went. And so did my mother and your dad. The Quest seminar. And it was still run by this great guy and his wife, Buster and Wendy.
That's right.
And one of the things I mean, that it was an amazing, I mean, back in the 90s to have a seminar that just breaks open I mean, that's where everything started for me. It just breaks open, it just shatters all your illusions.
Yeah, and it was damn hard. Yeah.
And they basically said in their life is a joke, and you get it or you don't. And not to diminish what life is and what you want in your life and all of, not to diminish it. But if you get the joke behind everything, then it just, you kind of always looking at life with these eyes of humor that often comes across as dark humor, but you kind of just like, guys, come on. It's always
beautifully
kind of
said. It's beautifully said, Mish, because we're talking about this relationship between, we're joking about the Greeks and how they spoke about this relationship, but essentially, I mean, a lot of guys, James Joyce, a lot of the great dark writers, they basically said that like your search for meaning and your search for purpose, and which is currently what I'm tackling, is at the moment a series of talks about meaning and purpose, but is essentially of some way of just trying to deal with this absolutely terrifying idea that you're born and you die and no one, if they're honest, knows why. And if you take it too seriously, you will lie in bed at night and shit yourself and be like, oh my God, we're all insane. And I think that the question of humor and what we are about to start, well, we've started deeply discussing, I think it's really important that we're aware of the fact that no one knows what's going on and that the role that humor plays. I mean, I've watched how you dance with humor, and I know that I'm similar, and I know some people find it quite offensive, but quite honestly, it's not masking my pain. I don't know what your experience is. I'm like, I literally see it that funny sometimes. And when I'm in pain, I feel the pain that intensely. It's just, you know, like I have to stop and laugh.
Yeah,
so, Michelle, tell me something. Here's a, let's begin kind of with a certain thing. It's not that hard to get out of you, but you've taken on some big things in your life, and I know you've got some big struggles, but you're on a serious search, and you're obviously getting to affect a lot of people in your life with what you're discovering, and I'm hoping more and more as you go. But what would you say would be the original things that started almost making you realize you were going to go on a spiritual journey? I mean, when did it start? Like, what did it start with, a series of problems? Or can you think of any particular moment where you realized that you were becoming particularly inner focused opposed to how other people were?
Well, Nath, yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, for me, two paradigms kind of collided, you know, early on for me, you know, at the age of like 17, between the ages of 17 and 19. I got mixed up with drugs, and I, you know, went on a it was a dark roller coaster. I mean, there were good times, but it was mostly, and spirituality just, it's almost like it came looking for me. It sort of collided, those two lives sort of collided with each other like that, like boom, you know, this at the same time as I was mixed up in all of that nonsense. I'd gone to the Quest seminar, and I started, you know, this whole other world sort of became apparent to me, you know, that we create our lives, you know, and it's still something that a lot of people don't want to have to face a sort of a fact that people don't really want to face, because it's about taking responsibility for your journey and for yourself, you know. And this reality sort of hit me that you know, we create our lives. I create my life, and I really wanted to experience being happy and joyful, and I wanted to experience love like everybody else. You know, I really wanted that, and I got to a point where I just realized that that's in my own hands, and I've got to create that. I've got to create that path. And so I started seeking and seeking and seeking as much as I could. Spiritual modalities, self-help books, seminars, workshops. I just went on this, you know, but at the same time, like I say, it's not, you know, the spiritual path or journey is not something that it's all of a sudden when you start it, it's beautiful, you know, rainbows and sunflowers and what have you. It's, it often runs congruently at points with very, how can I say, self-destructive coping mechanisms and whatever. It can run quite congruently with that, you know. So in my 20s, again, I had an alcohol problem where I drank pretty heavily, you know, to escape. I suppose I've always had very deep emotions and a very different kind of understanding of life, and this yearning to understand, you know, the universe and where we come from, and how, you know, where the soul goes, and what, you know, life after death and all these crazy things, atoms, you know, the atomic world and those sorts of things, and all these things going on in my brain, and deep feelings and emotions and feeling energies and things like this. And it was too much, I'm not going to lie, and alcohol definitely, how can I say, sort of diluted all of that, you know. And so I struggled with that, but there was always this, Michelle, there's more. You got to step into yourself. You stop running from, stop diluting yourself. It was always there. It's not even something, I'm not going to lie to you, Nate, it's not always something that I made a conscious decision, okay, well, now I'm going to leave this and go on the spiritual path. It came looking for me. It came seeking me. It was always there. I opened the door, it was there. I opened the window, it was there. I woke up in the middle of the night, it was there. I couldn't escape it. There was always this thing going, and it's most likely my higher self or my future self. I believe, you know, the higher self is a future version of ourselves, but she was always there going, you know, tapping, going, come, you've got
I
work
like
to
that explanation, hey, Michelle, because I'm just thinking, listening to your story, you know, no matter how I was behaving, whether I was being a super hooligan or so lost, or whether I was so desperately deep in my own pain, in the background, even though I might not have been acting spiritual, there was this constant thing of everything was contextualized into a greater meaning, and whatever that was. And it's not pretty. It really isn't, you know. But that burning desire is something that I know that has been in you for a long time. And I guess one could say, I mean, could you give any, it's a difficult question for anyone, but could you give any lip service to any form of madness, or like what would you think were your most difficult thoughts and experiences that you've essentially been driven by in your darkest times? Are there any specifics? Mine personally, I mean, I have many, but this is not so much about me, is a lot of mine was actually insanity. Like, I actually thought I was losing my mind through my experiences, and that I would say was been one of my hardest moments and years. Any particular things that you've really wrestled with that
no.
have been themes? What have themes been for you?
Well, Nath, I definitely resonate with what you said about feeling insane. I mean, there's a very huge part of my life where I thought I was crazy. I thought I was insane. You know, there's just the stuff going on. Yeah, I definitely diagnosed myself as completely insane. You know, and I think that drove me to self-destructive patterns and things like that. You know, and things until, you know, it all comes to a point of accepting this. It's this that we got to accept. It's, you know, when we talk about accepting ourselves and loving ourselves, it's this. It's this brain that we here to love and learn to accept in those things. And it's only when I learn to accept. So yes, definitely feelings of absolute insanity and self-judgment. absolute self-judgment. You're not good enough. A big thing, throughout my life was, yes, okay, great. I'm on the spiritual journey and I'm learning all these things and I'm healing myself and I want to help, guide other people. We know we can't heal anybody, but at least guide people and things like that. But I have nothing. There was a very big part of my life where I judged myself along the lines of materialistic, wealth and material gains and things like that. And I just looked at the people around me, with these high-powered, successful corporate jobs, and they have all these, amazing things going on for them. And I was not that person. It was just not my path and not my thing. And I judged myself and I hurt myself very badly for not living up to, society's, levels of success or how can I say, definition of success. It's only very recently, in fact, where I've learned that I have a very different definition of success, and success is actually a very, very unique thing for each and every person. It's not, this external, there isn't one, it's very personal and it's very unique for everybody, but it's only like
touched on that. Yeah, I love that, because as I said, the mission I'm on at the moment is just trying to speak into or give lip service in some form of value of this thing, of this purposeful life that we live. And I'm discovering that it is such a personal thing, isn't it? And the fact that we have this model where it's like, do this at this age, do this at that age. I mean, I'm 41 and I feel like perhaps at the moment, not perhaps, I know without a doubt, what I am doing is what, for the first time, is what I really wanted to do. So that's incredible, the way you explain it. So you obviously had quite a struggle with that, you said with your self-judgment and how it is you perceive that. Do you find you're still wrestling with that, or how did your whole thing with purpose and success is the way you're saying it, but we're having the same conversation. How has that evolved? How are you feeling about that whole thing in your life?
Well, Nath, it's an ongoing thing. I can't say that it's something that's totally resolved in my mind. It's not something, it's an everyday, every day I wake up and I go, okay, how am I going to doubt myself today? What's going to come up for me today? Let me, now that I'm aware of it and I've learned to work with it, I know that it's coming, and sometimes it still grips me sometimes, where I go into these spirals of self-loathing and self-doubt and self-pity and the whole lot, so especially suffering with depression. But I don't think it's only that causes that. I think a lot of people have these worthiness things, so yeah, I have to remind myself on an almost daily basis that I'm very successful. I'm very successful in my life in terms of what I value. You see, we all value different things, but in terms of what I value, I'm very, very successful. And I've found that since I've created that mantra in my life, a lot of things that I believed I never had before are sort of starting to flow into my life. More abundance is flowing into my life because I say things like, I am successful, and I believe it because I've defined what success means for me. So now when I say I am successful, it vibrates. And now I'm attracting abundance into my life from that, But again, it's a work. It's every day. It's every day.
It's so powerful. It's so powerful because, I mean, what we're kind of touching on here energetically is that we have these mental models that we, even though no one knows what's going on in life, which is just so funny, but we never have. And of course, for thousands of years, people were accumulating information, like the great minds, to try to pass out to help. But we're so arrogant in our modern time that we don't even look into that. But what I love about what you're saying is essentially we have this mental thing, and most of our suffering regarding each thing, and you touched on two, success and emotion, a lot of our suffering is based on this idea of how something should be, So for you to live this life where your life is falling to pieces and you just can't make it, it's not necessarily what's happening in your life. It's that you might be missing what it is that your soul is actually trying to express or bring into this life. like emotionally, you know, you were talking about emotions. I mean, a lot of people have a lot of emotions on the court. And a nice way of putting it is stop trying to feel differently. Just try and learn to feel better, which is something that I saw on your page, which is why I actually am using that quote. I don't know, I think someone you follow and you shared it. So it's an interesting thing how many of us are stuck. So for instance, whether it's your emotional state, right? Because they seem like two different conversations. This is Michelle Geldenhuys and her success. And this is Michelle Geldenhuys and her heavily powerful feeling, thinking body, that both of which have tormented you. But it's the same thing, really. It's like, are you raging against it, or are you recontextualizing it? Are you going? And this is why I think the search of meaning and purpose are so close together, because I don't know about you, but my emotions, if I have a context to put into why I could feel the way I do, and that allows me to get up in the morning, I deal with suffering in a completely different way to being some victim, which is why I loved you discussing that we are creating, you know, what it is we want. Any thoughts on that? Where are you?
Yeah, well, look, I'm glad you brought up the victim thing. And see, what I teach and what I've come to learn through my own journey, at least, you know, I think we all teach the things we've learned in our own journey, is that the victim, that victimhood, that victim sort of thing that we fall into will always be there until we make peace with that victim, until we actually hold that victim and give that victim the attention and love that they seek. That little child within us, really, it's the child that really was a victim at some point, you know. And I encourage people always to acknowledge the fact that, distancing yourself from that whole victim thing and victim shaming and pushing that away and excluding that from yourself because it's not right and you mustn't, we're being taught not to identify with the victim. No, I think that you need to incorporate that aspect into yourself as well and love that aspect and go, okay, yes, there were times where I was the victim and it did hurt, and it's okay that it hurts and that it feels this way and that it created these coping mechanisms and unhealthy patterns and whatever. Yes, the victim is there and I love you and it's okay. And once you've put that to bed, then you can say, right, but who I am now is the hero, because that's really where we want to be, right? We want to be the hero of our stories, and we can't be that hero until we've acknowledged and sort of acknowledged the victim, So yeah, so I think waking up in the morning and acknowledging all your different aspects, waking up and going, right, I know that I am the victim, I know that I am the hero, and I know that I am the perpetrator. Because as much as what we want to paint ourselves as victims and whatever, we've been perpetrators too. And not only towards other people, mostly towards ourselves. We are our worst abuser. Our absolute worst abuser is ourselves. So we have to acknowledge all these different aspects of ourselves and wake up in the morning and go, right, I have these three aspects to deal with today. Somewhere, one way or another, they're going to come up. I'm going to go through this day and these are going to be, so going into the day consciously and aware of these things.
Am I the bad guy in this interchange? It's possible I am. And right now, maybe I'm in the savior role. And right now, maybe I'm in the victim role. And can you at least acknowledge those archetypes at play in you? I love that. Carry on. It's very interesting.
Yeah, acknowledging the archetypes. Look, I'm only mentioning three. I'm mentioning, perpetrator, hero, and victim, but there's many. I separate my ego as well, and I go, there's my ego. I remember going to see a shaman once. I had some energetic, some negative energy that I wanted removed, and there was blockages and stuff I wanted to work with. And we got onto the topic of ego, and both of us decided my ego's name is Dizzy Lizzie. So, and it stuck. That was about 6 years ago or something. 6 or 7 years ago, Dizzy Lizzie. So I've got my ego's Dizzy Lizzie, and then there's that, and there's that, and and there's these, and there's depression, Mad Max, and there's and there's these, So I know these characters are with me. Okay, they walk with me, they're with me, but instead of demonizing them and hating them and rejecting them and whatever, like a small child is going to, if you reject a small child, try and do that and see what they're going to throw a tantrum. And these are what these aspects do, so if you can just, know that you're walking through life with an entourage, you got this, I mean, that's what being human is all about. We came here to meet our own entourage and walk with this entourage and go, all right, how are we going to navigate this experience harmoniously? So yes, you're going to enter scenarios where something's going to happen and you're going to react in a certain way, or you're going to do certain things, and you're going to have to stop and ask yourself, right, who is this now? And if you can really do that in situations, and you can really bring yourself back to the core of who you are, the real core of who you are, and not the character, you're not playing the character, which are these different aspects. Obviously they're characters, they're parts of the ego, of course, it's because our true selves, obviously our true selves is the awareness aspect, the observer, the learner, let's put it that way, the one who's learning, because I think we're all, we're always learning. Every experience, everything is we're learning. We're in the school of life, So if we can come back to our core self and remove all the characters, I think that is where we can have the most fulfilling experiences. We can just sort of figure out which character we're playing and have a little conversation with that character. Each character has a different way. You've got to speak to them and say, okay, this is not going to serve. Let me handle this one. Love you very much, but let me handle this.
Yeah, I know. I personally actually reprimand my own mind in a way that sometimes people I live with come running. I told the story the other day that my mind went running while I was cooking, and I caught it in the middle of this imaginary argument with someone, this fucking mind of ours. And I was like, hey! And everyone was like, what happened? I was like, no, I was telling my mind, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
So I get it. I mean, in some roles you almost have, and like you said, it's not to demonize. I was like a parent who had just caught my mind running, creating realities. And what's interesting? I don't know. I mean, this is a very interesting line of conversation, and I think it's very valuable for a lot of people. Is what I've noticed is people tend to go through like, I don't think we can ever make it hierarchical, which is what we try and do in spirituality. In other words, 11 becomes 12. But I have noticed that there's very distinct waves to our experience, and people tend to find those archetypes in a certain period of their lives. I usually say this in the early spirituality, but who the hell can actually even measure? It's such a ridiculous idea. But they find those archetypes in everybody in the world, that guy's evil. I can't believe what he does. And this is the dishonest one. And this is and so at odds with the world, like all those archetypes, just so, and it's almost like at some point, you don't really make peace with those archetypes. You start then experiencing all those archetypes on the inner level. And it's only once you can almost realize that everything that you perceive is out at play also in you, can you, first of all, what you sharing with us so powerfully about how to create this relationship of acknowledgement, because the one thing we know in shadow work, I mean, we talk about it in Wake when we create a container, is as long as something is acknowledged, it can't hide, it can't create chaos. If I'm going to tell you, look, this is really what I'm doing, and, it brings it into the light. And to have these characters basically standing on your basketball court, and all of them have a vest on, not being sidelined because Michelle or Nathan are in such a, they don't want to acknowledge the jealousy monster, and he sits on the sideline there, he only gets orange peels. And because he's not bought into the game, another very powerful thing is said is, and I experience the same thing, as they tend to dominate, like the ignored children. I think you spoke about the children. So I love that. And then while we become aware of these inner aspects of our lives, then, and I think that's where we maybe some of us have to have quite a divine experience when we realize that all these archetypes are at play within us. And then I don't know about you, we spoke about madness earlier, but then subjects like me, I, them, they, awaken, they start becoming a little bit more complicated when you're having this diverse experience of how many parts and frequencies and of you there is actually going on inside you, Carry on. What are you? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting. Yeah. So it's interesting what you've said. So I think a lot of the misunderstandings and a lot of the the misunderstandings and assumptions that happen in the world, and conflicts and what have you between people, is that we'll meet someone or we'll bump heads with someone because we only see one archetype in that person. As I explained, we have many within ourselves. And we'll find one archetype in somebody and we'll go, that guy is a perpetrator. And we'll label that person as one thing. We'll go, oh, shame, that person is a victim. Or that person is that person. And we'll label them with one aspect. And and I think it's very damaging not to realize that everybody in this world, everyone that you encounter is a myriad of aspects, a tapestry of aspects, should I put it that way? I mean, we can create a list that can carry on forever, but or almost forever. But if we can realize that people, let's say, for example, you're working at this company and you really hate your boss and you've labeled him as the arsehole. He's the arsehole. But what I think we forget that he's not only that. He's got many other aspects. He's also a victim. He's been a victim too somewhere. He's also a hero. He's also many things. And I think that if you took time to get to know the people that you kind of label this way, it's like that saying that says, don't judge people. You don't know where they've been. You don't understand their journey. And I think this is what a lot of people do, is we judge each other on face value,
Yeah, well, if someone saw me on some nights or some days or some conversations or some periods of my life, including myself, I honestly would have thought, well, this guy is such a fucking scumbag. Like, seriously. So, I mean, if I can do that to myself, I can imagine if I caught somebody else at a certain period of their lives, seeing it from my limited perspective, I could be like, wow, look at this. Like, he's a real piece of work.
Or look at this girl, she's a bitch, or she's whatever. It doesn't matter. We kind of box people into one aspect, and go, that person is that. And I think that's where a lot of our problems in life come along. It can get as deep as a parent that we had growing up that possibly shaped us, possibly hurt us, and sent us through our entire lives with a bleak look on something, a bleak outlook on something. And we only see the parents as that, and we forget that they have other aspects too. They struggled with something too. They're a loving person too. They're this, if we can just realize, that people have these aspects to themselves that, that's what I learned from going into myself and learning about myself and learning that I am these things. I think there's people out there who've experienced a part of me and might have said, this girl's a bitch. She's a straight A bitch. Or she's crazy, or she's this or that, or whatever the case is, and I know that that's a fact, and I know that I carry that within myself too. I have those aspects for sure, but I have many aspects, and that's where making peace with ourselves and self-love comes from, is looking at all these aspects and going, yeah, there are those aspects that I'm not proud of, that are unevolved and full of shit and judgmental and whatever the case is. But that's me. I have on the flip side, I have other aspects that are very loving and understanding and deep and nurturing and all these other things. So it's interesting. It's
amazing how we've almost mapped out in this very, just flowing with this conversation. I've loved it. But we've almost mapped out that these archetypes, the many faces of God, the many aspects of the divine, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's written right across ancient teachings, but even in modern spirituality, we have all these. But these archetypes, we're basically saying that they're outplaying within us, but they're also outplaying outside us. And I think people tend to be externally focused, like the enemy's out there, or they internally focused and the enemy's in here. And it's a very different experience, but it's you know, as within, so without, as above, so below. I mean, these are, and what's incredible about the conversation about archetypes is, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but the other day I was thinking, like, you know, in astrology, we have now, I don't really study astrology. I just watch some of my friends who are astrologists and the things they release. But I mean, I've got an understanding of it. And in astrology, there's this idea that these perfect planets, no accident, right, are aligned in your life. And that, let's use Mars. Now, Mars represents that certain energy. And you know that when Mars is coming into your life, that it brings the positive and the negative possibilities, and there's just an influence, and how you react to that influence. Okay, so now the reason I'm bringing that up, imagine if we looked at archetypes in that way. Imagine that arsehole boss that you're bringing up. Imagine if we realized that the people that are making these circles in and out of your life on a daily basis or on a yearly basis, or like you and I, who have a profound effect on each other's lives, but seem to only do it when we connect every year or two. Can you imagine if we perceive these outside archetypes or characters coming into our lives just as these planets that have a certain influence? He makes me angry. He also allows me to grow if I can face that. And sit there in your life and watching, oh, there's Mom, she's that archetype. And what, you know, what are your thoughts with that kind of
that we're all planets idea? That we're all planets, for sure. No, you know, I love that. That's you know, I always say everything is always spinning. Everything is spinning. The planets are spinning, our atoms are spinning, we're spinning, and we're all creating gravity around us, even though we don't, you know, perceive it. And when we often attract, you know, we often attract our own little solar systems around us, you know, of different characters. You know, we create this little solar system. Yeah, and definitely, I think that we will attract, you know, what's needed in our growth. You know, like that boss, when he's being an arsehole, could be like the, what do they call it, the retrograde.
Yes,
yeah, the planets are in retrograde because like this crazy person's come into your life, you know, or, you know, yeah, definitely. I think that I think it's all set up. I think that it's all, you know, someone said it in The Matrix. It's still my favorite film. When he goes to see the Oracle, and she says to him, everything has already happened. Your job now is to try to understand why. So I love that. So it's almost like everything's been set up. It's this whole spinning of energies coming in and out of each other's lives to teach and grow, with the end result of us all reaching our highest expression, which we already have, because time is not linear. It's all happening now. It already has happened, and it is also still happening as if it hasn't happened. So I think that we need to, as you said, become more aware of who's coming through my life, who's orbiting my reality at this point. What is it teaching me? How's it moving? I mean, if we're 70% water, right? I mean, who's that moon that's coming into your life to make these waters all go all crazy and wake you up? You know those moons. Sometimes we have a moon that comes. But yes, it would be an interesting way to look at it. Like, what is the solar system? If you think of your environment and your reality as a solar system, you know, what are the stars saying to me? What is this? Am I in retrograde? Who's coming in to shake things up? Who's coming in to bring calm into my life? But at the end of the day, it's all for the purpose of growth and alignment. I mean, the universe, let's be fair, the universe has a very, very divine plan.
I love it, because I mean, if we talk shamanically and we just talk about plants, if you think about like an acorn or a seed, right? What people don't realize is, if we were to say we're all seeds, right? Absolute intelligence or a massive tree is implied in that seed. It hasn't happened yet, because you're talking about time and our experience of time. I mean, when I hold an acorn, the acorn tree has not happened yet. But the thing is to start to almost tap into that level of divine possibility or responsibility, which is the way you've been putting it across, that once that seed exists, being you, that every force and every pressure and every thing that is required for you to become the exact tree that is already implied within your very cells, just like that seed, it's implied. And to get out of this, oh, something's gone wrong, I shouldn't be on this planet, I shouldn't have had those parents, to tap into that whole, because I'm sure you see that in coaching quite a lot. He's trying to get people connected to the fact that perhaps nothing's gone wrong. That's a difficult thing in shadow work. Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought that up. It does come up a lot in coaching, and it's come up in my own life as well. And I actually want to share something with you. I was driving the other day and it came to me. I was, having this conversation with myself as I was busy driving. I think luckily now I feel a lot more comfortable doing it because, I could have a hands-free kit, right? So everybody else driving next to me sees me talking, and they don't know there's no hands-free kits in the car. It's just me and me having a good old convo. So, how can I put it? So, all right. So dealing with this, getting people to come back to the moment of now and accept the way things are, because there's something about our human condition, the existential malady, that makes us think or believe that this now moment that's happening now is wrong. It shouldn't be happening. That somewhere along the line, we made a huge mistake and this should not be happening. This experience that we're having right now in this moment is it's a fraud. It shouldn't be happening. Something else should be happening. And it's kind of the weirdest thing to deal with because logically, that is the most illogical, insane way to think of anything. How could this moment that is happening, how could it be wrong? So I thought about it in the car and I thought, okay, let's put it into perspective. And I thought, let me really dissect it to give people and to give myself an idea of what that actually means. Let's say, for example, yesterday I did or said something that was absolutely, or I made a decision, or last week, let's say, for example, I made a decision that I believe was absolutely so wrong. I fucked up. I did something so terrible. And everything that's happened from then going forward should not be happening. This is a mistake. This whole reality that's happened since then is a complete mistake. But now you've encountered other people in this mistake of a reality in the last week since you made that decision, right? There's other people in this reality. You've met people, you've spoken to people there, your family is still there, your friends are still there, the world is still happening and it's still there. So if you're in the wrong reality, then all these people are also in the wrong reality. Every single other person's experience and who they are and everything is also a mistake. Because how could it just be a mistake for you? Then the whole of reality must collapse.
I love that.
And obviously because it's not, and because everybody is still there and everything is carrying on, it's all meant to be because it's all intertwined. We're all intertwined.
Absolutely. And whether those things, as some of the quantum guys suggest, might all outplay still means the absolute perfection, It's an incredible conversation because I've realized at stages that, and I mean, if you read some of the great masters, which I know you do, like they talk about this level of enlightenment being to get to the point where you eventually realize that you are. And always used to think about it being the state or this thing you find. But then I've observed my life and I've realized the moment I am grinding against how my life is, which is an interesting conversation in transformation because, as the prayer goes, give me the strength to accept, what I cannot change and, but what I'm actually saying is sometimes I've realized that to consider for even a moment that it isn't perfect as it is right now is immediately disconnecting me off from source. And I love the way that you've just explained it because I'm not really being able to describe it. But the second I can get into the fact, like to me, to move ahead, because I get myself into such trouble all the time, to move ahead from a point where I've really fucked things up, I can only ask myself in that moment, what is the most powerful step I can take forward? And I find when I close my eyes, whether I'm having a seizure, or whether I'm feeling sorry for myself, or whether I'm whatever it is, I can only reach for the most powerful thought that I can. And the most powerful thought that I can reach for tends to be that what you are experiencing right now is the absolute perfection of what you need, in the fact that what you become is already implied, which we discussed in the acorn, which we discussed in your, and that's really powerful, because I don't know, I mean, we're talking about coaching, and it's what I actually want to do the last 15 minutes. I just want to ask you a little bit about your writing and but we do find that most coaches, that you and myself are talking about coaching and working with people with different things, that if you can't get them present first to what's going on, to get them to own it and to go, oh, everything I want to become is implied, is already going on. And these planets that are spinning around me are my perfect astrology. There goes John, there goes evil dad, there goes, and if I can just figure that out, and it's quite exciting, because it's almost like we use this word present very easily, don't we? But to get present just for that moment on how perfect it should be,
just to get present, because a lot of people, and it is a trauma response. A lot of people are so busy, their lives are so busy. Just to go to therapy, or just to speak to someone, or to see somebody for some coaching or guidance, is already such a massive thing that, because they've packed their lives so full of, I'm busy with this and I'm busy with that. And it's the kids, and it's the husband, or it's the wife, and it's work, and it's got to drop this off, and I've got to help that person, and and they pack their lives so full of stuff that they literally avoid with passion the present moment. And it can be very challenging to bring someone out of that, to realize that, this notion of being so busy is a narrative. It's a narrative, and it's a narrative that is self-avoidance. It's self-avoidance, and it's avoidance of the present. So there is.
I do it. So what you're describing is hitting me.
And I mean, we've all done it. I've done it too at stages of, I'm too busy. I can't worry about that. I'm too busy, and what happens, we burn out, when we do that for long enough, we burn out, and then you get the other end of the spectrum where people are kind of, they've just lost touch with reality completely, and they're too into, they've gone too much or too far into doing this internal work, that they've kind of disengaged from reality. And so there's that too, and so bringing people back to the present moment is really, it can be tricky, and it really means understanding these different, understanding the spectrum, where the person is on the spectrum,
I like that you brought up that the being inner focused can also become a disorder. I mean, I think it was Walt Whitman who spoke about, if a man is too much man, he goes crazy, and if he's too much God, he goes crazy too. I think on the path of doing shadow work and working with traumas, I can only speak for myself. I've noticed that sometimes it's a self-obsession. Like, I believe, now this is the shadow, the thing I don't want to admit, because I know that you guide people in shadow work. And the thing I don't want to admit is, even though I'm really having a hard time and I really need to solve this, and I'm in psychic hell, but I am so internally focused on myself that it becomes kind of a self-obsession. And a lot of people have spoken about the fact that you can't solve a problem by focusing on it for too long. And it's a very interesting thing. And then there's some other people, as you just said, that are so externally distracted. And I tend to waver between the two. I don't have a healthy balance. So, I mean, we're having such a fascinating conversation, and we're only really touching on points. The one thing I've been pretty clear on is that I think everybody's going to need to come back a few months down the line so we can dive deeper. But tell me a little bit about writing. Like, what got you into writing, and what's your relationship with it? And
I think, Nathan, I have the feeling that it's like this for other writers out there. Maybe not every writer, but I do feel like I'm not alone in this. In that. you know, if you grow up in this life, or your experience of this life has always been that you kind of never have a place where you entirely fit in. You're kind of a bit of an outsider, and you're kind of different. You've just always been different, and you've never really had someone that, or people that you can really express yourself to, like really, really deeply express yourself, all of what you are and everything that you are, and everything that's going on in here, in the heart and the mind and everything. You don't have that. So that drives you to, you can't suppress that. You can't express that need for expression. I mean, you can, but that's going to lead to substance abuse. It's going to lead to self-harm. It's going to lead to all of that. We need to express ourselves. We absolutely, absolutely need to express ourselves. So for me, I find that expression in writing. I find it, you know, I sort of, how can I say, I surrendered that need to have a physical person there to express to, and actually realizing that I can express myself through my words and put my words out there for many people to see, whoever wants to see it, and all of that. So I can still express myself, and you know, it's really a means of expression, because it's, you know, it's important. It's I think I would go mad. I would go really mad and insane.
It makes sense. I like the way you explain it. It
Yeah.
makes sense. Do you want to share with anyone who's actually watching just what it is you've tackled so far in your writing? I say so far because
Right.
we're both actually very young from a perspective of that, you know.
Right. So yeah, I started. I mean, I wrote. I started writing very young, and I started writing blogs. From in my early 20s. I think I was nominated on there was a blogging platform on News 24, and there was also a blogging platform called My Digital Life, and I think it was 20 somewhere in 2000 something 2009 or something. I was nominated for Blog of the Year, and so yeah, that's when I really started to take notice. Okay, my writing, you know. And then my first book that I wrote, which is available on Amazon, called Evolution of a Battered Mind. So that's just basically a memoir, you know, my journey of, you know, my early life up until my early 30s. My struggles, you know, with addiction and depression, and how I overcame that, and how the spiritual journey happened for me. So it's all there. It's all there in my book. Then I had a spiritual sort of, we can say, sabbatical to Cambodia, to Southeast Asia, but I always say Cambodia because I think it had the most impact on me. And whilst I was in Cambodia, which was only a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called A Guide to Shadow Work, because, you know, I think I started diving into shadow work and doing my own shadow work quite in depth about 7 years ago. It started with my first ayahuasca ceremony, which was actually with you, in the house in Kensington, in the old famous empty pool in Kensington. And one thing I can say, plant medicine will definitely show you your introduce you to your shadow. So that's where it began for me. And I wrote a book called A Guide to Shadow Work, which is just, it's really a short but powerful guide to shadow work. It's an introduction really to shadow work, and a nice step-by-step guide. But I definitely think I'm going to be writing a more in-depth book on shadow work soon, as a sequel or prequel to that. And recently I brought out a book called, last year actually in November, I brought out a book called 365 Shades of Love. And that's really just a cute coffee table book. And it's 365 shades because it's one quote for each day of the year. So you kind of leave it on your coffee table, and you know, instead of, you know, drawing an angel card in the day, you can literally just open the book. What's the date? Oh, and you can read your message. You know, and it's wonderful messages. It's all quotes that I've from my previous blogs and books, and some new ones that I came up with. So yeah, and they're all on Amazon. I can, you know, I'll put, I'll perhaps post a link to them on the Mad Hatters group if people want to check them out. But yeah, so I'm very proud of the work that I've done. You know, although as I said, I do have that inner critic. You know, so every time I've brought something up, or published a book, I go into like the spiral of beating myself up for like a month afterwards. Like, oh my God, how could you tell people this shit? How can you? It's terrible. What have you done? And it's not good enough. And it's this and that, blah, blah, blah. But that's just, I know it's coming, and it's all good, and I deal with it. But I encourage people to definitely, if they have something that they want to say, write a book, get it out there, write a blog, paint the picture that you can see in your mind, write the song that you want to write, get it out there. It doesn't matter what your inner critic says. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. It's just do it. Just do it.
I love that. I think that creativity and expression is such an interesting thing. It's like if you look at the conversation of deity or divinity, what's pretty accepted across the board in most religions and spiritual ancient sects is that we're never ever going to be able to explain or agree or give a name to this thing that we all talking about, but that we can only express things about what this thing brings to us. In other words, like a knowing. And that's where art and music and words and all of this is born from this divine fountain, but that no one will actually ever be able to define the fountain. So creativity, I think, is such a beautiful part, And then for yourself in this journey, what do you think you're going to be up to in the next little while? I'm going to ask you if you can to just at some stage in the next day or two post into the Mad Hatters anything about how they can find a link to your books or how they could contact you, because you do still do coaching, right?
That's right. Yes. Thank you for reminding me. Sometimes my mind goes and I forget. So yes, I do coaching as well. I coach in shadow work, and I'll post a link to my shadow work group on Facebook. But also, if you want to get hold of me, my email address is author Michelle Geldenhuys @gmail.com. So it's author Michelle Geldenhuys, one word, @gmail.com. Otherwise, private message me on Facebook, so yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, Mish. And in closing thoughts, there's no wrong or right. Just the last few minutes, I thought I'd ask you, what do you think about this 2021? Like, no specific, just what the fuck is going on in the world right now? What do you think? There's no right answer because I have no idea. But any thoughts for us? No rush. We're not in a rush.
Nate, you know what? If I had a rand for every time I didn't know what was going on, I'd be like, where the fuck is all this money coming from? Nate, I feel like the world's been too complacent for too long with things that are just not right. And I think that whatever the fuck it is that's going on, it's shaking things up, and I like that. We need to be shaken up. Our roots need to be shaken up. We need to be shaken up. We need to question what the hell's going on. We need to question the structure of society. We need to question how we're looking after our bodies and how we're not looking after our bodies. We need to question what we're doing as a community. We need to question how important connection is. We need to question our own sanity. We need to question what we believe. We need to question everything, and we need to sift through the layers of illusion and find out who we really are. And I think that if anything, what's been going on has been pushing us into that. It's definitely been pushing us as a collective, globally. It's been pushing everyone and nations and families and societies and everything into realizing who they are and questioning who they are. And relationships have ended, have gone through the ringer because people have come face to face with the shadow aspects of everything. I mean, the globe, the world has been doing shadow work this last year, whatever it is. It's been shadow. It's all shadow. So yeah, whatever it is, I think that we need to take this opportunity to really rethink how we've been living, how we've been treating each other, how we've been treating the environment, how we're treating our bodies, how we're treating our minds. It's an opportunity to rethink, to reset, to revive, to reinvent. These are the times in humanity. If you look at all the collapses of society or whatever that's happened, you know, in our history, it's events like this that creates this new sort of renaissance of, you know, let's reinvent things, let's rethink how we're doing things, let's reinvent, let's co-create, let's, you know, and I think that's where we are. Let's make the best of this opportunity, you know.
I love that. I mean, even in Vedic astrology, I don't know if it's Vedic exactly, it could be Hindu, but I know that, you know, there's these mighty 26,000 year spirals, and we're just crossing over one right now, you know.
100%.
And I love the way you're explaining it, because I think that I think we get a little bit lost if we fight about exactly what is going on, because that's like with any truth, is to link too strongly to one truth puts yourself in polarity. And
I mean, we can sit and argue about the nitty gritties and, oh, it's this and it's that and it means it doesn't matter. What are the feelings? What are the changes that it's inspiring? How is it going to, how can we take what's happening and create something beautiful from it? How can we transform the cyanide into honey? That's where we are.
I love it. I remember actually, I don't know how old we were, young teenagers on the basketball court once, and you and I were having this conversation. It was always a crazy conversation. But we were talking about whether we were scared if aliens came down and announced they were here, or if the world, there was a world-changing event. I don't know if you remember this. And you said something to me along the lines of, look, that does scare you a little bit, like the whole of society changing, but that you were more afraid that it wouldn't. And that really stuck in my mind because of what you're sharing now, you know.
What scares me most is if things don't change. That scares me. But obviously change is inevitable.
I love that. So I think it gives us courage. Yeah. I think it gives us courage in the eye of this cathartic events that we're in, you know. But it's interesting because we are very disconnected to ancient wisdom, and we think we are this spaceship rocketing through the universe, completely random monkeys, like clinging on, trying to figure out what the fuck's going on. This is how disconnected we are from the divine. And that it's 2021 and all this accidental stuff is going on. And if you just slow down and you talk to someone that studies ancient stuff, they'll be like, well, they've predicted this, and this is this change, and where are, you know, and it's just, yeah, it's a fascinating thing that we, there are far more. We spoke about archetypes. Archetypes don't just exist within us. Our entire evolution has archetypal stages. The Renaissance, the word you used, you know, the Middle Ages of unsurety, and we are definitely in a birth-death spiral right now. Like the way something opens and something dies at the same time. And we just don't really know what it is we're birthing or deathing, but we are all experiencing it on an internal level. 100%. And that's why fear is, I think, so prevalent. And to do the shadow work right now with a good guide or coach or book or whatever it is that you do, I think it's really, really powerful.
100%, 100%. We definitely, death and birth are inextricably linked. You know, death is birth, birth is death. So I think it's just been ramped up. I mean, the speed at which it's happening now is more intense than we've, I think, ever experienced in our lifetimes, and at least for the last 1,000 years, maybe.
I completely agree. I mean, there's no ways that it's coincidental that these monkeys spinning on this rock are experiencing pressures that we've never experienced before, like pressure from whether you want to talk about the Schumann resonance to the fact that some people are proving that time is sped up, or the fact that we have more pressures from society, from opinions, from the media to, I mean, we like in an information war. If ever there was something to inspire us to journey within, it would be to go and look around and listen to everybody arguing and tearing the fabric of reality apart.
Get the popcorn.
Yeah. And just pull in and go.
Late at night, I can just be like, what's everybody fighting about? Let me see. Let me see. So interesting.
That's exactly it. I think one of the most fun things you can do is to go into the comment section of anything a bit controversial and just sit and watch the beauty of
Jerry Springer. Yeah, we come.
Yeah, the beauty of truth unfold, and to wonder sometimes why it is that we ever feel the need to so powerfully defend a single truth when we know that any truth that we once held has now transformed. So why is it that we don't realize that any truth we hold in this exact moment will soon be a changing? So to really fight for a single perspective is an interesting thing. I don't think that doesn't mean that we can't stand for anything. So yeah, I want to thank you. I found it a very, very interesting conversation. Why do you think, if there's anybody out there that kind of has just joined us for this chat, maybe who doesn't have any knowledge of shadow work, but has recently been exposed to this idea that just chasing the light aspects of yourself and the divine can be quite toxic. It has been my experience, and it has been your experience. What would you tell someone about even what you think shadow work is? No wrong, just why would you encourage someone to go and have a look at doing a little bit of shadow work for themselves personally?
Well, it's really comes down to, really taking a long, hard look at those parts of yourself that you've judged. So it's really, people often say, but how do I do shadow work? I want techniques. I want this and that. And it's really, shadow work is a lifelong journey. It's not something that you do on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon and then it's done. It's something that it's sitting down to begin with. Sit down and write a list. Put their shadow and light. Okay. Let's not call it dark and light. It's just it's the shadow, and neither are positive or negative. But write down all your positive, aspects of self. And be honest, and it's not narcissistic to do that, and it's not self-absorbed or selfish or whatever you've been taught to see the good things of yourself. Write down all the great stuff, and then on the other side, write down the stuff, even the stuff that you judge, the stuff that you're ashamed of. It's not just okay. I am unkind sometimes. I mean, go deeper into it. Go deeper into it. What is it that you really judge about yourself? Identify those things. That stuff that really makes you feel uncomfortable. Like it almost feels some of those things, you think about them and it almost feels like pulling barbed wire through your insides. Like, oh my God, I wish I didn't do that or say that or whatever it is. I wish that wasn't part of me. I just want that to go. I just want to embrace it, accept it as part of you. It's really going into those things, and there are other, how can I say, there are techniques that you can, like healing the inner child. Inner child work is a big part of my shadow work coaching, and it's bringing somebody, taking all those things we've judged and moving them away and coming back to and just viewing the inner child, the innocent child, who was the innocent child before all these things happened. Just bringing the person back to that child, the inner child. So inner child work, it's reconnecting. If you look at all these gurus in the world, Nath, you'll agree with me. Go and sit in a lecture given by Sadhguru or Muji or any of these guys, and you will see that they are childlike. They've returned to their absolute childlike essence. They're playful. They see the humor in everything. They're laid back. That is ultimately what spiritual enlightenment is. It's becoming a child again. Let's be honest. And how do we do that? It's coming back to our pure innocence, realizing that we are innocent. We are pure innocence and pure love. That all these other things that have happened and that we've experienced makes us feel certain ways because we've labeled it. We've labeled it as right or wrong. And if we can take away all those labels and just look at these things as experiences, as learning material, in the school of life, and that we are still that inner child. That's who we are. That's our soul. Our soul is that innocence, that pure, magnificent innocence, and that's all I can really say about that. I mean, I could go really in depth on how to move through those layers and all of that, but I think it's radical self-honesty. I don't know how else to put it. It's radical self-honesty and realizing that you don't have to portray some God image to the world. You don't have to. Just be yourself. Just be who you are.
I love that. I think that is the absolute perfect way to end, because I have felt, I mean, sitting in circles of transformation, sitting in a circle, that when one person sits forward and deeply owns an aspect of their shadow, that the whole of the circle is completely different. That the next person was going to say something that they thought everybody wanted to hear. We had this experience recently with people talking about suicide, you know, and the one person was going to talk about it. And next thing, like quite a few people were talking like, fuck, I'm having this experience, you know, like I'm self-destructive. And it's almost like your process of ownership that you go on. Instead of hurting those around you, it encourages the others to look inside their cupboards and to own it. And yeah, and I think those that are looking for perfect gurus, they shouldn't be around people that are doing shadow work, because it's messy and it's full of sweat and trauma. But you know how many quotes I'm busy collecting right now for a talk I'll do one day. But you know that I have about 28 quotes from the top gurus of all time, where in a single paragraph they spoke about that the path to heaven was through one's own inner shame, torment, and hell. So literally, the fact that you're chasing the light embers,
you're going in the wrong direction.
Realize the doorway, you're going in the wrong direction. Go into the shame, and you've perfectly encapsulated it for us to end there. I absolutely loved it.
Just to point out there as well is, don't get caught, don't get attached, don't get addicted to it. It's, of course, yes, there's the light. The whole point is to not get addicted to either side, is to live the middle way, to acknowledge both sides and live the middle way, appreciate the light and learn from the dark.
Perfect. What a perfect way for us to end. And I want to thank you for giving me this evening and us this evening. Please don't forget to post your information. And what I'm going to do is, if you have anything you want to add, please let us know, because I'm about to go off the live broadcast, and then you and I can stay and continue to talk for a minute or two. So anything you want to add? Thank you so much for the evening.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. Really, thanks for this opportunity. I always love chatting to you, obviously. And I hope, thanks for everybody out there who has listened and whatever. I'll post some links to my books that I was talking about. And of course, Shadow Work Coaching, my email address is author@gmail.com.